Welcome to April's edition of YourTown television program, and I'm King Grossman, your host today, and my segment on YourTown each month is Artivism, where we explore the intersections of art and our community, how art shapes our community and our society at large, and then how our community and our society at large informs our art in whatever form it may take. And today I'm really happy to have Keith Larson back. Hi, Keith.
How you doing, King?
It's great to have you back. Keith and I had a wonderful discussion here a little while back on Artivism about his wonderful artwork and his sketch work that has been contributed to various publications, and certainly one here that really celebrates Pacific Grove. But we decided to, because of your illustrious career and endeavors as a cartoonist, yes, through that spans decades, that we'd have you come back, and I really appreciate you doing that.
Thank you. I'd like to be here.
Yes, and so Keith's work, your work has been in Cosmopolitan and then in Training Magazine, and we'll look at these, but it really spans some big name publications as well as, hey, our local newspapers, and so I really appreciate that as we think of it in terms of artivism. And so maybe just start off and tell us, if you wouldn't mind, how you came to the art form, why this kind of turned you on, how you got into it, and then how it developed for you.
Well, after coming back from art school, California College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland, the place that I could really start was magazine cartooning. And in those days, most professions had a magazine connected with the work of people. So they used to call them house organs.
Okay.
So I did cartoons from anything from a locomotive engineer publication in Cleveland to the Masonic Lodge magazine, the Northern Light in Watertown, Massachusetts.
Wow.
I had little publications that were all over, and once in a while I'd get into the bigger ones like Cosmopolitan, and then later there was one called Lear's that I'm not sure exists anymore. But I also, at one time, it was a very interesting process. I developed what I thought was a pretty neat cartoon strip, and I sent them around to my fellow cartoonists to see what they thought, and there was one who had a syndicated strip called Frank and Ernest,
Okay.
Bob Faves, who passed away a few years ago, but he called me up and he said, well, I kind of like to buy these ideas. So I thought, well, that's a way to get started there. And wasn't going to use my artwork, but he used my stories for his Sunday pages, so that was kind of neat. And that's kind of how I got into it, as it was a way to start.
Yes.
And I actually could find publications that were using single panels cartoons at that time, and there's not as much of that anymore. Either the magazines have moved online or they just don't exist anymore. I think most of the information for different professions have moved online.
And so there was just a plethora of cartoonists in that. Let's say at that time, right?
Well, I think the heyday or the golden age of the single panel magazine cartoonist was probably the late 1940s, 50s, early to middle 60s. That was when the big monthlies like Saturday Evening Post, yes, and Look and Life, they used single panel cartoons.
Yes.
And I was never part of what they call the Wednesday rounds in New York, where
Okay.
the cartoonists would take their roughs to the different publications and then come back the next week to see if any of their roughs had been approved for, and then they do a finish and then send it off to the magazine. I basically worked through the mail,
Mm-hmm.
and I would have a little brochure, and I'd send my brochure out to different magazines. I'd say, does your magazine use cartoons? And if so, please send me a copy back. I'll read it and get some ideas and send some roughs back to you. So that's how I got in. A lot of them said, oh yeah, we were looking
Wow.
for a cartoonist, or yes, we do use cartoons. And so I had a number of little publications all over the country.
Well, that's so you could go direct. and make your pitch direct to the
Yeah,
to the mag.
and
Yeah.
the bigger ones, of course, had actual cartoon editors that would, that was one of their main jobs, but mostly for the smaller magazines, just the editor of the whole operation would pick the cartoons.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got to meet some fun, accomplished cartoonists in your
Yes,
day, and
yes.
one of them was one of the I think very prolific cartoonists around the country was Eldon Dedini.
Yes.
And Eldon lived in Carmel, as I understand
That's
it.
right.
And you got to know Eldon and actually have some of his work. You brought one. I want to
Yeah.
put one of his pieces up, and maybe
Well-
tell us, again, how fun was it to be around in this group?
Well, that was a rough there. Eldon, I had gone over, I had met Eldon through another local artist here, Dick Crispo, and he introduced me to Eldon, and that was what you just showed to the camera there.
Right.
That was a rough. Eldon was trying to help me with some design of my characters.
Okay.
And for that one, I said, could you just sign that? So that was the only one he ever said.
Yeah.
But he was just so encouraging, and he said, oh, he read my stuff. Oh, this is insane, he said. But, a lot of it did sell because it was funny, kind of borderline insanity there. But he just said, well, Saturday mornings are good. Come over and see me if you need some help. He's
Yeah.
just very gracious.
But very collaborative like that, yeah.
Very much so, very encouraging, very helpful to a new cartoonist. And we had the cartoonists around here, the Northern California Cartoonist Association, had monthly lunches over in Carmel.
Oh, wow.
So we had, living around here, we had Gus Arriola, who did Gordo, and of course Eldon Dedini, and then Kent Ketchum lived here, and a number of, a few magazine cartoonists also, and different, Al Parker, the illustrator, would show up sometimes, and if Eldon Dedini wasn't there, he'd say, well, if I'm funny by 12, I'll be there. If not, I need to work. So
Yeah. I'm working.
I'm
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it was very, very nice.
Well, let's get into some of your work.
Okay.
Let's put up one that appeared in Cosmopolitan. If we could put that up on the screen right now, that would be wonderful. And this is a wonderful piece. The caption reads, from Mary Shelley, nothing contributes so much to tranquilize the mind as a steady purpose, a point on which the soul may fix its intellectual eye. And then maybe talk about the piece a little bit.
Well, a lot of people ask, well, where do those cartoonists get their ideas? Well, I can tell you where I got this one. It was perfect because I was working at a house in Carmel, and the daughter was about ready to go to school. So the mother was saying, well, I think I'm going to make her room into an art studio for myself, And so I thought of the caption, it's a catchphrases. If you can get a catchphrase that everybody can relate to, then you've got part of a cartoon, though. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have the daughter coming home with a suitcase and saying, but Mom, I thought my old room would always be waiting for me. So,
and this is what the caption on the cartoon reads.
So it's like, when the children go away to school or move out, a lot of times the parents, well, don't worry, your old room will always be waiting for you. But in this case, it turned into an art studio.
That's lovely. Yeah.
That was used in Cosmopolitan, and I guess they had some other, their publication went to Africa. So I got a letter one time that your cartoon was going to be used in our edition in Africa. So
Yes.
so that was really fun.
Well, and go in a room and create something, artist.
Yes.
And there it is. That's wonderful. Yes, but Mom, I thought you said my old room would always be waiting for me. And yeah. And so this next one is hilarious. It was in Training Magazine, as I understand it. And
Yes.
Maybe just kind of go through it a little bit. Let's put it up on the screen as well.
Well, Training Magazine, they used a lot of my cartoons in those days, and it was a human resource magazine for employees and businesses. And so I wasn't out there in the business world, but at that time my wife would come home and tell me stories about the office, And she said, there's this guy, he kind of creates these problems and he just sits back and watch. Well, I just took that literally, And I
Yes.
made him watching in his cubicle with some popcorn and something he had just started between another couple of the employees there. And I thought, well, gosh, that's pretty funny. And so I had that, they took that in the magazine, and she took that to work. I'm not sure that that man thought it was so funny, but the other people in the office did.
They got it.
Yeah, they got it.
The ones on the other side of the power struggle.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, have we not
So-
all been there in one form or
So
another?
that was a lot of fun getting that idea and drawing it up.
And then this next one that we'll put up, if we can, appeared in Natural Foods.
Yes, and of course, Natural Foods, that was just about the time the genetically engineered products started coming about. With magazines, you couldn't do general humor. These weren't general humor magazines. You had to target it to what their audience was.
Okay.
And so I felt, okay, I'll have this guy reading a newspaper, and then the wife is praying, you know, we haven't done that for years, how come? And it says so right on the news that, you know, untested genetic foods being offered in stores.
Yes.
So she's praying about it. So that was perfect. And it was, you read something like this, it's very one-pointed and gets the point across very quickly without having to wade through a whole article.
Well, this is something, you know, that we talked a little bit about before the show, and the form of cartooning can put so much of an issue in a humorous way, but in a pointed way. It can make it human, but also bring the message through in just 4 words, 3 words, but with the picture, which of course we say always speaks, you know, a bucket full of words. So just the power of this, I just want to underline, and I guess the need for it, and any loss we may have as these print publications and the let's say the number of outlets for cartoonists is actually shrinking some.
Yes. With cartoonings, it's got to be brief anyway, whether it's a strip cartoon or a single panel.
Yes.
But if you can get it across in a funny way, especially if there's both sides of an issue, if you get both sides to laugh,
you've done a good cartoon.
You've done a good cartoon, because the main thing first is entertainment.
Yes.
But yes, and getting the point across for your audience is also second too. So
yes, it's right there with it.
yeah, it's right there with it. So
yes. Well, as a writer, they say, you know, talking about the entertainment part, I'm a writer. They say, you know, the first thing you've got to do is get your reader to want to turn each page one at a time.
Right.
Each
Right.
one has to be compelling and entertaining. So let's move on here to one that appeared in Teaching K-8, and this is great for education and teachers and relationships with teachers. So.
Yeah, I had a number of, I was the only cartoonist in this magazine for a long time. And this particular cartoon, I'm not certain how I got this idea, but I thought, you know, I might have come back to see one of my old teachers. That might have been how I got it, and I'm older. And not having visited a long time, maybe she would have said, well, how come I haven't seen you around, how come? So I thought, well, if I was still in school, she'd probably have me write on the board, you know, I will visit more often, I will visit more often.
This came to you.
And in my day, I mean, I'm not sure how it is now, but once in a while, we had to write on the board if we, to really bring home a point. So I thought, well, that would be funny, and I did that. So
made me laugh when I saw it. So
yeah, so.
Experienced it. So these were national publications, and I know we talked. One we'll get to later was done in a national magazine, but. Let's switch over a little bit as we're kind of winding down on time. We've got a few more minutes. But because of what this has done, you know, with you locally and in the local paper, the Butterfly Town that appears in Cedar Street Times.
Well, these cartoons were actually appeared in a Butterfly newsletter in Southern California. My son was smaller and very much of a scientist type, and there was a scientific group in town that studied the monarch, actually in Encinitas. So I offered to do a little cartoon for their newsletter, and well, they fit pretty well in town here. So they appear right now in the Cedar Street Times, and they're basically scientists that are studying butterflies that talk and their interactions. I've enjoyed getting ideas for this kind of a fanciful type of strip. And other people tell me they really enjoy it too, so it's kind of gratifying to have the.
That's wonderful, Keith. So this is an ongoing strip.
Yes, I don't know how many of them I produced, 30 or 40 of them, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah. Fabulous. And then doggy problems in this area,
Well,
where it's such a dog-friendly area.
Yeah.
And then, there are doggy problems. So
Well,
this appears in Foolish Times, right?
This does. Foolish Times is a publication that is distributed throughout Monterey County. And, well, this happened, this particular strip actually happened to me, this particular
Let's
incident.
put this up now.
Yeah, I was in church, and the minister had just brought her new doggie, and it was a little bit aggressive towards me. And so I had to kind of kneel down and look small and give it a doggy treat, and I said, okay, I've had it. This kind of thing has happened to me too much.
Too many times.
I'm gonna write about it. And it's also good for me to get out some of these things in a humorous way, so I can laugh too.
You work them through it.
So that I don't become too serious about it. But doggy problems was resulted in from ideas that an experience that I had with doggies.
Yes.
I'm more of a cat person, but I'm having fun with this strip, and
It's also ongoing.
it's ongoing too. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I've got one for you, an idea anyway. You may take it or leave it, but my dog Bogart, he's friendly to everyone, never met a stranger, but he barks because he gets excited to want to know you.
Yes.
And his tail's wagging while he's barking. But of course, if you don't know him, so our FedEx guys, they're unwilling to come on the porch anymore.
Right. Well,
So you got the barking dog with the wagging tail.
I was a paper boy when I was a little boy. Delivered the Monterey Herald around here, and dogs were not my friends at that time. They have to throw the paper. They didn't like that. I can understand it, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do this. You brought another piece, and this appeared on the Masonic Lodge magazine, which is a national publication. It's just a magical piece.
The way I got into the Masonic Lodge magazine, The Northern Light, is I sent a brochure out, and sure enough, they were looking for a cartoonist. And for years, I had done single panel cartoons in their magazine, and then they wanted me to do some covers. So this one, I actually might have done 12, 15 covers for them, but this one was my favorite. Father and son, and they're looking up in the sky, and there's a Masonic Lodge symbol there in star. And so I thought, this is really neat. So I did this in color pencil, and it's one of my favorites, and that's why I wanted to show it today.
Yeah, well, I can see why it would be. Well, Keith, you've had a great, over decades of doing your cartoons and getting them accepted into one form or another of our media forms. And now you continue on with your strips here locally, and I just say keep sending them out nationally. Even though the market's shrinking, yours are wonderful. So I wish you well with everything you do with them, and thank you so much for coming and talking about this very important art form. Again, it's so clear, crisp, it gets to both sides of the issues, makes you laugh and think.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, King.
All right. And thank you all for being a part of this episode of YourTown television program. Stay tuned. We've got 2 more coming up with Chuck Banner, who's on the front lines of our indigenous rights movement and climate justice movement with the Lakota Law Project in the Romero Institute. We'll see you later.